snare. Shall it come on all them that dwell on the face of the whole earth, a snare. Watch ye therefore, and pray always, that ye may be accounted worthy to escape all these things that shall come to pass, and to stand before the Son of Man. And as we pause here for a moment, just to remind you, as a reminder, that this video testimony is being recorded and posted as a response to a video that was posted by a YouTube alliance that calls himself by the name, I quote, Adoniyah 720, end quote, whose birth-given name is, I quote, Willie or William James Jackson, end quote. That is a response to a video posted that Willie Jackson subjected me, Mika Israel, as a cult leader and false prophet. In retrospect, in particular, a video that he posted on February 17th, 2026, that is titled, and I quote, Behind a Black Gate, Cult Compound, as well as Behind the Gate, Mika Israel, Cult Compound Exposed 2026, end quote. Whereby those words and what he has posted is a lie. It is virtually a lie. He's a liar. And he cannot prove, although we are going to prove in this video, as this is part one, that he's a liar. And we're also going to prove, and we're going to also reveal the meaning, the true meaning of cult, spelled in English from left to right, C-U-L-T, end quote, as well as occult, that's spelled from left to right, C-O-L-T, end quote. We're going to reveal the mysteries and the true meaning of these two words and how they are related to biblical prophecy, as well as the Bible, etc. And what I am merely doing is reminding all those on this planet, all over 9 billion people, that must subject and submit to what is promised in the Bible, the King James Version Holy Bible, the 1611 edition, as well as other Bibles, that's read in the book called Revelation, the very last book of Revelation, in chapter 21 and verse 8. And that reads, as I quote, But the fearful and unbelieving and the abominable and murderers and whoremongers and sorcerers and idolaters and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burneth with fire and brimstone, which is the second death, end quote. Now, that not only pertains to Willie Jackson, who's now taken on a biblical name of Adoniyah at 720, but that prophecy is a promise for all those that fit those definitions and those meanings in that verse. Again, and they are the fearful, the unbelieving, the abominable, all murderers, whoremongers, and sorcerers, the idolaters, and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burns with fire and brimstone. And not to forget to mention that Willie Jackson is not the only liar that has blasphemed against me. So thereby, taking this personal, if it fits you, if this prophecy of promise fits you, in any one of those meanings, then yes, you should take it personal, because the Bible does not lie, and God is not a liar. God is a man that does not lie. He does not lie. You can confirm that in the book called Numbers, in chapter 23 and verse 19. And that reads, as I quote, Numbers chapter 23, verse 19, King James Version Bible, quote, God is not a man that he should lie, neither the Son of Man that he should repent. Hath he said, and shall he not do it? Or hath he spoken, and shall he not make it good? End quote. So those are questions. Even the Son of Man will not repent for the things that he is reminding this planet of today. And biblical prophecy and history proves that Micah, the Morasite, the so-called Morasite, that has a book in the Bible, the 33rd book, is right in the middle. The theologians in the world has already proven that he is the Son of Man, the same in the New Testament as the Son of David, also known in Christianity as, I quote, Jesus, end quote. But remember, his name was Yahshua in Hebrew. It being ludicrous to think that God is not a man, for thereby, how could that be so, when it is already recorded and proven in the very first book called Genesis. Genesis in chapter 1 and verse 26. And that reads, as I quote, and God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. End quote. How could God not be a man in order to make a man in his own image, in our image? In fact, verse 27 goes on to read, as I quote again, so God created man in his own image. I repeat, God created man in his own image. That means God is a man. It goes on to prove that says, in the image of God created he him. See, God created another him, a man, in his own image. And not only a man, but male and female created he them. End quote. He even created women, male and female, in his own image. So therefore, with that said, and now reminded, remember, this video is protected under the United States constitutional right, under the Bill of Rights, as even Amendment 1, especially Amendment 1. And Amendment 1, or so also known as Article 1, Amendment 1, and it says, and I quote, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. End quote. So now, with that said, as a reminder, and I remind the United States government as well as the protocols and the prototypes of social media channel that's called YouTube, that I exercise the right to post what I post, especially in retrospect and in retaliation and in response to those who have attacked me personally as a citizen of the United States of America. That's a reminder. And finally, in conclusion of this benediction, of this first part that we're about to publish and testify of from the Celestial Lodge, let me remind you also, and also emphasize to you, that history is repeated itself. That means that everything that you're about to see and hear is prophetical. Not only is it prophetical, but it's also historical. That means that the very same souls that were here before, over 2,027 years ago, are here again today in a human vessel. It being that they were prophesied to return today to be here with the Christ, just as it was prophesied for the Christ to return in the same manner, just as recorded in a book called the Acts in chapter 1 and verse 11. Moreover, those that return today with the Christ, that were here before with the Christ, will also name themselves just as promised in the book called Isaiah in chapter 44 and verse 5. And that reads, as I quote, "One shall say, I am the Lord's, and another shall call himself by the name of Jacob, and another shall subscribe with his hand unto the Lord, and surname himself by the name of Israel." End quote. And that is exactly the prophecy that's fulfilled by who, again, is calling himself by the name, the Hebrew name, or the Israelites' name, I quote, Adoniyah, end quote, which of course was one of the sons of David, but we'll get into that in another part. But for now, I said that to say this: the very same souls of those that were here before with the Christ are here today. And they did the exact same things that they have done yesteryear. Again, they are doing today to the Christ. Now, that means, just as recorded before the crucifixion, as the crucifixion, spiritual crucifixion, was recorded and left for record in Revelation chapter 11 and verse 8, that mentions and records a great city where also our Lord was crucified. And that great city today is known as Miami of Florida. Now, getting back to John, in John chapter 18, beginning at verse 1, it reads, as I quote, verbatim, "When Jesus had spoken these words, he went forth with his disciples over the brook Cedron, where was a garden, into the which he entered, and his disciples." That's verse 1, and that garden is an allegory that represents Miami of Florida, that also has a garden in that county that's known as Miami Gardens, which is just a little north of where the kingdom here in Miami of the Christ is, in this county. As verse 2 also says, and Judas also. Now, this Judas is an allegory, remember, with J, that represents, first of all, two things. The first thing is Judah, that Judah would be in this great city where the Lord would be in the last days. And the latter part, the suffix is as. That means that there would be an ass with Judah today in the same land. And this ass, you will see in another part, is known as the colt. And that's the C-O-L-T of this prophecy testimony, this prophetical testimony and revelation. So this Judas, this ass of Judah, who has named himself, as it says in Isaiah chapter 44, verse 5, Adoniyah, and even with numeric 720, which betrayed him, knew the place. He knew the place, and he proved that in his videos, that he knows the place that he calls behind the black gate. For Jesus oft times resorted thither with his disciples that he's calling the compound, the cult. And in verse 6 of John chapter 18, as soon then as he had said unto them, I am he, they went backward and fell to the ground. Why so? Well, up in verse 3, going back up in verse 3, it says, I'll quote, Judas, or the ass of Judah, then, having received a band of men and officers from the chief priests and Pharisees, cometh thither with lanterns and torches and weapons that you'll see in his YouTube videos at the beginning. And in verse 4, therefore, the Christ, knowing all things that should be done in these days, and things that should come upon him, went forth, and said unto them, Whom seek ye? And they answered him in verse 5, and they said, We're looking for Micah today. Micah, the Moabite. As they mentioned back then, Yahshua of Nazareth. And Yahshua said unto them, I am he. And the ass of Judah, who also, which betrayed him, stood with him in the same tribe of our Lord that sprang out of Judah, according to Hebrews chapter 7 and verse 14. Then, as soon as he had said unto them, I am he again, they went backward. They went back into life. They went back to the slave master and fell to the ground. And then asked he them again, Whom seek ye? And they said, Micah Israel, also known as Charles L. Johnson. Back then it was Yahshua of Nazareth. Well, that says so many things. Even as I said back then, I will say it again today in English, as I said back then in Hebrew. You have no idea who I am. Neither do you know who my disciples are today, as we have now returned to this planet. And what you're about to see, I'm going to forewarn you now. Just as it says, and I told my disciples, but just as I told Pilate, it's recorded in the same chapter, when Pilate entered into the judgment hall again in verse 33 and called Yahshua, as they called Micah today, and said unto him, said unto me, Art thou the king of the Yehudites, the king of the Hebrews, the king of the Jews? And the Christ answered him, as I'm answering you today, Willie, sayest thou this thing of thyself? Did you, or did others tell it thee of me, and put you up to this? Well, Pilate answered back then, Am I a Jew? Am I also an Israelite? Am I Hebrew? Thine own nation and the chief priests have delivered thee unto me. What hast thou done? Now here's my response today, as I will forewarn this planet as they watch this video that follows in verse 36. John chapter 18, verse 36, confirmed. You see, my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight, that I should not be delivered to those men of Yehuda, the Yehudites. But now is my kingdom not from hence, nor ever will be of this planet. In other words, we're known as aliens of another world. And now with that confirmed, watch this. Now, as we continue on in this testimony. Dearly beloved, to those of the Sister Lodge and to this planet, to those that are abroad. This is the voice of whom this government is identified, has been identified too, as, I quote, Mika Israel, end quote. However, that is whom this government is keeping away from the people of this planet, who I am in reality that is soon to come out, as these UFO files have now been ordered by the President of the United States to be revealed and released to the public. In the meantime, however, this recording is in response to a recent video that I viewed on social media's YouTube that was empowered by whom is being called Adoniyah 720. The video in question was posted on social media's YouTube, according to the calendar, 5 days ago to this date. And for the record, this date, according to the Gregorian calendar, is recorded as Sunday, February the 22nd, 2026. Again, today, according to the Gregorian calendar, is Sunday, February the 22nd, 2026. Again, this is in response to a video that was posted by one whom is calling himself, again, I quote, Adoniyah 720, end quote. That was posted 5 days ago from this date, according to the post. And that would make it around the 17th day of February 2026. Nevertheless, and as a reminder, this very same individual, a so-called African-American citizen of this country's government, was loosed out of his seal of prophecy by my very same celestial soul approximately 1 year ago this month. And if you search my YouTube channel, you will find that revelation of this very same individual, a terrestrial being, also known as a demon, that is titled, and I quote, The Fifth Angel Revealed. And that would fall into parts 1 and parts 2. Part 1 and part 2. So you can search my channel and look for those two videos, and you will get a foundation of when I revealed this individual, who is in fact, and by prophetic, the fifth angel that I loosed from the bottomless pit. And that is according to Revelation chapter 9, beginning at verse 1. And that reads, as I quote, verse 1, And the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit. Now, as I pause there for a moment, the fifth angel that sounded with his own YouTube channel. And as he sounded, his subject was a star that he wants to fall from heaven unto the earth. But the star that fell from heaven unto the earth hath with him a key of the bottomless pit. Now this star symbolically represents the Son of God. And remember, fall from heaven unto the earth. And to him was given the key of the bottomless pit. That means whoever is in this pit is bottomless. That means they will continue to go on and drag on as D-R-A-G space O-N, as juxtaposed together, a dragon, a drag on. There's no end to what they want to do except death. That means they will continue and continue looking for fame, looking for followers, continue with their lies, continue with their own glory, and continue until they reach their destination, which is the second death, and they will be destroyed. And that is not a threat. That's a prophetical promise. In fact, verse 2 says, and he opened the bottomless pit. And that's the same angel with the key that opened the bottomless pit. That means these particular dragons and demons were always in the pit, waiting to be loosed. And there arose a smoke out of the pit, as the smoke of a great furnace. And the sun and the air were darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit. And that's what he intends to do, darken the sun. He wants the sun, and that's S-U-N, that's symbolic for S-O-N, to be darkened by reason of the smoke of his channel. If you look at the beginning of most of his channels on his YouTube channel, you will see that he opens his programs, he opens his views, he opens his testimonies with a devil's smoke, a demon and smoke, also with sound effect, with applauding. He applauds himself. He's looking for company. He's looking for fame. He's looking for followers as he applauds himself. Why? Because no one wants to applaud him. No one in their right moral mind would applaud a devil or a demon anyway. And there came out of the smoke locusts upon the earth. That's locusts as they hop. They hop from one video and one subject to another. They just hop, busybodying, going from video to video, looking for his own kind to belittle them on social media. Why? Because he's a lonely child. He was not loved coming up by his parents, at least one, meaning not knowing who his biological father is. So he's lonely, looking for followers. And unto him was given power, the power of a button, the power of a cell phone button, the key, buttons, power of a computer keyboard to press buttons, power of a microphone to speak through on social media, as the scorpions of the earth have power. That's verse 3. And it was commanded them that they should not hurt the grass of the earth. The grass is those who are following the Messiah. They are the angels of such a large that are following their destination, following their leader, following the lamb of the field. Neither any green thing that's full of life, and he will not hurt my people. Neither any tree, but only those men which have not the seal of God in their foreheads, whom he wants to attract on his social media's website of YouTube. He wants to attract men to follow him that does not have the seal of God in their foreheads, not on, in their foreheads. They do not have the knowledge of the God of the Hebrews in their foreheads, in their brains. That's the end of verse 4 of Revelation chapter 9, verses 1 to 4 of the King James Version Holy Bible. It's the 1611 edition of that Bible. So therefore, however, this video that I'm making is in response and in acknowledgement of that video that was produced and posted by, again, who calls himself Adoniyah 720. Needless to say, there is a good side, and there's also an evil side. There are two sides to a plate. One side that you eat from that has the food, and the other side is the bottom that sits on the table. This testimony is being directed to the bottom that sits on the table that I prepared for mine angels in the presence of mine enemy. coming from Psalms chapter 23 and verse 5. Knowing this first, as I begin, that is also promised that there shall come in the last days scoffers, walking after their own lusts, and saying, where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of the creation. For this they willingly are ignorant of. But by the word of God the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of the water and in the water, whereby the world that then was, being overflowed with water, perished. But the heavens and the earth, which are now, by the same word are kept in store, reserved unto fire against the day of judgment and perdition of ungodly men. But, beloved, I warn you now, and I also encourage you to be not ignorant of this one thing, that one day is with the Lord as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as one day. In other words, in more words, the Lord is not slack concerning his promise, as some men count slackness, but is long-suffering to usward, not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. And that's coming from the same Bible, the King James Version, Holy Bible's New Testament book called 2 Peter, in chapter 3, and verses 3 to 9. Also keeping in mind in verse 10, that the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in the which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise of what they call UFOs, spaceships, celestial spacecrafts that are coming to ignite the bodies and souls up and burn them like a day in an oven. And their bodies will disappear at the sight of a light, the power of a light, a laser beam, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. The earth also and the works that are therein shall be burned up. Seeing then that all these things shall be dissolved, what manner of persons ought ye to be in all holy conversation and godliness, looking for and hasting unto the coming of the day of God, wherein the heavens being on fire shall be dissolved, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. Nevertheless, we, according to his promise, as Hebrews, far from beyond this planet, from everlasting, look for a new heavens and a new earth, according to Revelation chapter 21 and verse 1, wherein dwelleth righteousness. Wherefore, beloved, seeing that ye look for such things, I encourage you to be diligent, that you may be found of him in shalom, in peace, without spot, and blameless. That's verses 10 through 14 of the very same book of 2 Peter, chapter 3. And as I now conclude this benediction of what I'm about to reveal and share with this planet, this know also that it is also promised that in the last days perilous times shall come that are now here. And like Adoniyah 7:20 calls himself that, for men shall be lovers of their own selves. Adoniyah 7:20. a perfect example. Even covetous, boasters, selecting individuals and men that mean no harm to anyone, whom he is jealous of and could never be like them or even come close to tying their shoelaces. And so much until they will also be proud, thinking that he can encourage people to listen to his channel and even call them family. And during certain recordings, he would pause and say, "Do you see this, what I'm talking about? Do you see what I mean by this?" Speaking English Creole, like, get off the flow, close the door. "Hey, y'all, you see this? You see what I'm saying? You see this fool?" Etc., etc., etc. Quote and end quote. Lovers of them, their own selves. Boosters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful for what he has gotten in this country of freedom, opposed to being locked up in prison as he was for several years during his lifetime. He's a prisoner. He's an ex-con, an ex-inmate of prison. Unholy. Committing unholy acts to get him arrested and go to prison. Without natural affection, not any at all. Truth breakers. I actually thought that he was gone. I thought that the last videos that I singled him out and revealed him to this planet as the fifth angel, that he would go away, just be blown away in the wind like dog's dung dried up, like dried dog's dung blown away in the wind. But for somehow he survived that. He survived the wind. Truth breaker. False accusers. I'm going to prove in this video that every single word that he spoke against me, that he only know as Mika Israel, quote unquote, is false. False accusers. Incontinent. Fierce. Despises of those that are good. He despised me that is doing good for the people. I'm not looking for gain, and not once have I asked any of the people that you're about to see in this video that are no longer here. By the way, as I take you back to a news video that was recorded way back in 2021 during a certain condition that has since been corrected, and every one of the people in that video that were unrighteous, that were unholy and wicked are no longer here behind the gate. That makes him a false accuser. Incontinent. He's also experiencing fears. And as I mentioned a moment ago, a despiser of those that are good, like me. Traitors of his own people, and Uncle Tom, working for the white man. He's a white man's Uncle Tom. He is a white man with black skin, a white devil with black skin complexion, or brown, if you prefer brown, with gold teeth, as it said in Daniel, the book called Daniel. He have gold teeth, high-minded, lovers of pleasures of himself more than lovers of God. In fact, he wants his followers to know that he has a form of godliness. Really, having a form of godliness, but deny the power thereof. And I encourage you, my beloved people of this planet, my holy angels, and those abroad, from such, turn away. Taken from the same Bible, King James Version Holy Bible, the 1611 edition, in the New Testament's book called 2 Timothy, in chapter 3, and verses 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, as in the fifth angel. And now, let us go to this video as I prove that he is a liar, just like his father. He is of his father, the devil. For he lies in the beginning. When he first brought my name out of his mouth, the name that he thought he knew my name, from the beginning, he was a liar. For he is a liar, and his father is the father of it, that he's followed. He is one of those that are mentioned and recorded in the book called Revelation chapter 12, and verse 9, an angel of the great dragon, deceiving the world. Well, with that said, let us go to the video.
Shalom, Israel. What's up, YouTube? Adoniyah 720 with another community update. As y'all see on the screen, family, y'all see the infamous false prophet, Micah Israel.
Now, notice how at the beginning of his video, this particular video, he greets his viewers with Shalom, family, quote unquote. As we also would like for you to take notice of the sound effect of applause. As I mentioned during the benediction, he's looking for fame, he's looking for glory, he's looking for followers, even so much until he calls those who are watching family, his viewers, family. Greeting them with shalom and have no knowledge of what shalom means at all. Although not knowing that shalom is a man, it was promised in prophecy that shalom would be a man, according to Micah of the King James Version Bible, the book called Micah chapter 5 and verse 5. Whereby the greeting that he intends to greet the world with on this www website is shalom, according to Strong's Concordance reference H7999. However, he greeted the world with shalom by the man, not realizing he's speaking of the man when he mentioned Micah Israel. And it's the very same soul, Micah. I am speaking to you right now. It was promised in the Bible and prophecy that Micah would return. So therefore, and thereby, if you are looking for Micah, then you have better look very hard, and you must look for the man that is erudite, adroit, sagacious, clever, wiser than Solomon, and he will also be the truth, the spirit of truth. For thereby, he only knew, as he mentioned in the beginning, and knows my name that I'm going by this government, according to the identification. Even my United States passport says, I quote, Micah Israel, end quote, and that's all he knows. That is all they know. Greeting his viewers with shalom, family. Again, with a sound effect, applause in the background.
Adoniyah 720 with another community update.
Who is it that would need a sound effect to aid them into being recognized as if he's being loved by sound effect? He's being loved by a sound effect of applaud. As I mentioned in the benediction, he has no one to love him, so he goes out and seeks love of his own attention.
As y'all see on the screen, family, y'all see the infamous false prophet, Micah Israel.
He also, in the beginning, refers to Micah Israel as a false prophet. A false prophet. And yet, nowhere in the Bible, whatever Bible it may be, but in particular, the King James Version Bible, or even the New King James Version Bible, nowhere in the book called Micah, the 33rd book, placed right in the middle of the Bible, that Bible, can you or anyone claim that Micah was or is a false prophet? Even in chapter 3 and verse 8, that records that Micah says, for truly I am full of power by the Spirit of the Lord, and of judgment. That judgment, you will see in this video, as Mika made a makeshift courthouse in his backyard to teach his people judgment, justice, the law, just as promised that he would do at his return in the last days, according to the book called The Very Beginning, Genesis, in chapter 49 and verse 10, Shiloh, the lawgiver. We're going to get to that in a moment. We're coming up to that in a few moments in this video. But what makes him think that Mika is a false prophet, and yet there is not one thing that he can come up with, or that he did come up with, in this video, which happens to be a news clip that was recorded back in May of 2021. Not one thing in this video that showed that Mika was a false prophet. Keeping in mind that during that interview with Karen Hensel of WSVN Channel 7 here in Miami of Florida, Mika, being adroit, sagacious, and wise, the man of wisdom, according to Mika chapter 6 and verse 9, told the news media and that news reporter every single thing that Mika wanted her to know, that was according to the world to know, and not what's happening off of camera or what's happening today, February 22nd, 2026, behind the gate today. You have no idea what's happening behind the gate now, but you soon will. Why is that? Because now their president, that's known as Donald John Trump Sr., has ordered all government offices to release now the secret files and documents of what they call, I quote, UFOs, end quote, and alien beings from another planet. Now you're about to find out who we are. In the meantime, as we go on now in this video, after the applaud, and after he asks his family, do you see this man? See this man? This false prophet, Mika. And yet again, I repeat, there is no word false prophet next to the book called Mika, the third book of all Bibles. But let's continue.
He's a retired Miami police officer and also a retired police corrections officer.
Now, as we pause here for a moment, that's a lie. That's the first lie. Although he mentioned the infamous Mika Israel, so in his right mind, in his sense mind, his mind of common sense, he at least knows that Mika is infamous, even historical as well as biblical. The infamous Mika Israel. Keeping in mind now that there are a lot of other Mika Israels that are roaming out there on this planet, walking around, all in a wheelchair, even here in the United States. But he acknowledged, as the fifth angel, he acknowledged the one who placed him out and took him out of the bottomless pit, recognizing me as the infamous Mika Israel that has the key, who loosed him out of the bottomless pit. Then he goes on to say that he is a former Miami police officer. That's a lie. Listen to it again.
Y'all see the infamous false prophet, Mika Israel. He's a retired Miami police officer and also a retired police corrections officer.
As you just heard again for the second time, he said that Mika Israel is a retired Miami police officer, and he goes on to add a retired Miami-Dade correction officer. Both is a lie. He's a liar. If you check the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, FDLE, they will show no record, and they hold all records of sworn law enforcement personnel in the state of Florida from 1896, when the city of Miami became incorporated as a city. And nowhere in the records of the City of Miami Police Department will you see that Mika Israel, or would he have on his channel to the bottom, if you look, it's Mika Israel, a.k.a. Charles L. Johnson. You won't even find a record of a Charles L. Johnson ever being a sworn law enforcement police officer with the city of Miami, Florida. And we should add Florida because there are at least 9 other cities of Miami or villages of Miami in the United States. There are at least 8 different states in this country that has a city or a village that's known as Miami. For example, Miami of Ohio. Miami of Ohio. Also, there's a Miami in Oklahoma. There's a Miami in Minnesota. That's just to name a few. I'll name 3. And nowhere will you see officer by the name of Charles L. Johnson or Mika Israel in any of those cities or villages of Miami as a police officer, former police officer. Neither, and I'm testifying to you the truth, neither was I ever a retired or a working correctional officer for Miami-Dade County Corrections Institute. I never was employed as a correction officer. That's a lie. I'm dedicating this part to all his lovers and followers that believes him. Now check your records and see if you cannot find me that to be true, that statement. Never a correction officer. Let's go on. Let's move on.
This is when the news, you know what I'm saying, caught wind of this dude, you know what I'm saying, from all these, you know what I'm saying, anonymous tips and everything.
Now he goes on to say that the news media got tip of this dude. I went from the infamous Mika Israel to now I'm a dude. What is a dude? Even as he said, the news media received tips. What kind of tips did they receive? And as we continue.
Right. This is when the news, you know what I'm saying, caught wind of this dude, you know what I'm saying, from all these, you know what I'm saying, anonymous tips and everything. That's how they found out about him, you know what I'm saying? Because they would never stumble on his coat. So this how Mika Israel really got exposed in 2021. You know what I'm saying? This when he originally got exposed, y'all, during this news coverage right here. But in his news coverage, you know what I'm saying, he gonna try to...
Now he is saying that Mika Israel got exposed in 2021. Exposed. Exposed of what exposure? What is his definition or meaning of the exposure that Mika Israel experienced or encountered? He also mentioned that this is a cult, that I was a leader or I am a leader, as he continued, of a cult. And that cult is spelled in English from left to right. C-U-L-T. Cult. Again, from left to right. C-U-L-T. And according to various dictionaries online, or one that you may have in your home, one dictionary says that a cult is a noun that's defined as a relatively small group of people having beliefs or practices, especially relating to religion, that are regarded by others as strange or sinister or as imposing excessive control over members. End quote. And that is nothing compared to what was happening here. That does not fit the definition of what was happening here. Everyone that came to this property here in Miami, behind the gate of my house, came voluntarily on their own because they wanted to be with me. See, they came fulfilling prophecy. They came even by the voice. They heard my voice, and they know prophecy. As it said, that the dead shall hear the voice of the Son of Man, as it says in Matthew. It also says similar to that in John of the New Testament. And as they hear the voice of the Son of Man, those that were dead shall live. That means I had a bunch of dead people that were dead. They heard my voice and they came to me to live, to survive, even as we go on in a few moments in this video, to escape the pandemic of what they called at the time that came out in 2019, or that was deemed as a pandemic in 2019, that I forewarned everyone on this planet by my social media's Facebook page in 2015. On July 13, 2015, I warned this planet that every nose and mouth on this planet would be forced to wear a mask because of a plague that was coming. Even in the courtrooms, I mentioned the lawyers would have to wear a mask in the courtrooms. Again, that was July 13th, 2015. Now, is it safe to say that 4 years later, in 2019, do your math, is it not true that this entire planet and every nose and mouth was forced to wear out, when they went out in public, were they forced to wear a mask in the public? Even in the courtrooms, the lawyers were wearing a mask? What is false about that? That does not sound like words of a false prophet. Check my Facebook timeline and see. What is false about that? Even he himself had to wear a mask in prison or in jail. So what's false about that? Anyway, as we go on to another dictionary, the subject right now is cult. And by the way, our ethnicity does not relate to religion. We are celestial beings. We do not believe or practice in any religion that was made by mankind on this planet. And that's according to 2 Kings chapter 17 and verse 29, that every nation on this planet, every single nation, made a god of their own and put them in churches they call high places of the Samaritans. They're the cults. In fact, Merriam-Webster's Dictionary.com online says that a cult, according to that definition's meaning, it says that a cult, C-U-L-T, is a group as an organization or religious set that tenets and practices regarding as coercive, insular, or dangerous. Also, number 2 of that definition is a great devotion to a person, idea, object, movement, or work, such as a film or book. It also says that, in part, that a sect is a group of people characterized by such devotion, as in Christianity and churches and Islam and Hinduism and Buddhism and anyism that's created by mankind, often used before another noun, cult, a system of religious beliefs and rituals. Also its body of adherents. This means that the biggest cult on this planet is Christianity, with billions of followers and sect members, sect. Sort of like a small group, opposed to a small group that was created by a fellow by the name of Jim Jones, that took a small group to a small island and promised them salvation in heaven. All they had to do was drink some Flavor Aid and hug each other, lay down on grass in the yard, and die. That is a false prophet. That was a false prophet. The nerve to think somebody would drink. How ridiculous and ludicrous that is for someone to drink Flavor Aid promised by a false prophet, and you must die to go to heaven. I am not the God of the dead, according to Matthew chapter 12. I'm the God of the living. You do not have to die to go to heaven. In fact, there are no dead people in heaven. And neither is your cousin or sister or brother who died last week, or your grandmother who died 10 years ago, even your uncle who died 15 years ago, and even those that died 40 years ago that you may know. None of them died and went to heaven. They are not waiting on you, and you will never see them again. The God of Hebrews is not the God of the dead, but of the living. What makes you think that this is a cult? You are confused. You hadn't studied the word cult. Besides, why is it being spelled at the beginning with a C opposed to a K? The word is cult with a K. Why is it spelled with a C opposed to a K? That's because it's an allegory that means you cannot see what a cult is. If you did, it would be okay for you to study the word. So I'm telling you now, it is okay for you to study the word cult. That way you will not make yourself look like a fool. You will not be colored as a fool anymore in social media's eyesight, no matter how many viewers you have, whether it be 1 or 1 million. But right now you're being looked at by the Social Lodge as a fool. Do I have anyone else that agree? You seem to be confusing me with, quote, Charles Manson, end quote, who was a cult leader. Charles Manson. See, he was false. He's a false leader. Oh, did I mention that he's also a European white Caucasian man who, according to the definition of the Britannica, his cult was usually a small group devoted to a person, idea, or philosophy. In fact, the term cult is often applied to a religious movement that exists in some degree of tension with the dominant religious or cultural inclination of a society. In recent years, the word cult has been most commonly used as a pejorative term. Correction. A pejorative term for a religious group that falls outside the mainstream and, by implication, engages in questionable activities. Many new religions are controversially labeled as cults. That's new religions are controversially labeled as cults. And that's according to the Britannica Dictionary online, computer software. You can find it if you go to Google. You go to your Google search box and type in the word cult under definition. And it'll take you to maybe the 5th or 6th link from the definition of cult until you land on where it says cult, definition, religion, and philosophy, or actually psychology. That takes you to philosophy. It'll also take you to a photograph of, I quote again, Charles Manson being led away in handcuffs. Why? Well, because he was a cult leader, being transported to a courthouse in Independence, California in 1969. Or did you have any kind of common sense during that year? In the meantime, let's go back now to the video. The video of subject, that features, again, I quote, Adoniyah 720.
You know what I'm saying? He gonna try to spin it and say, oh.
Notice how he says in that small clip that I'm going to try and say something. How is it that I'm going to try? How is it that I was trying to say something? I'm going to try and say with a ghetto English Creole slang language. I don't try and say anything. Every single word that I said to that news reporter in that video came from my soul. It came from my mind that's being controlled by my soul that comes from everlasting, and I meant every single word. I didn't try and say anything. I told her, because I was not speaking to her. She was merely a liaison. I was speaking to the United States government, and at the time I was speaking to Donald John Trump Sr., as well as Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. That's who I was speaking to.